The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest room that any human had ever seen. It stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, with seats carved into floating platforms that hovered at different heights. Representatives from over 200 species filled those seats, their bodies ranging from small insect-like creatures to massive beings that looked like living mountains. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, a soft golden glow that made the chamber feel almost sacred. Ambassador Linda Morrison sat in the human section, a small corner near the back of the chamber. Humanity had only been a provisional member of the council for 15 years, and their delegation was treated accordingly. They were given the worst seats, the shortest speaking times, and the least respect. Linda had grown used to this treatment, but she had never grown to accept it. Beside her sat Captain Daniel Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet. He was a tall man in his 40s with a stern face and gray eyes that missed nothing. He wore his dress uniform, dark blue with silver trim, and his posture was perfectly straight. He had been assigned to protect the ambassador. But they both knew that if something went wrong in this chamber, there was nothing he could do. They were surrounded by species that had been traveling between stars. When humans were still living in caves, the session had been going normally until High Counselor Vexroth of the Corellian Empire requested permission to speak. The Corellians were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. Their empire spanned over 300 star systems, and their military had never lost a war in 4,000 years of recorded history. Vexroth himself was an imposing figure, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with dark purple skin, for gleaming yellow eyes, and a mouthful of teeth that looked like they could bite through steel. When he rose from his floating platform, the entire chamber fell silent. The Corellians commanded that kind of respect, or perhaps that kind of fear. "Fellow council members," Vexroth began, his voice deep and rumbling. The translator devices turned his words into every language spoken in the chamber. "I wish to discuss a matter of great concern, the matter of the human species." Linda felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her face calm. She had been a diplomat for 30 years. She knew how to hide her emotions. "These humans," Vexroth continued, gesturing toward the human delegation with one clawed hand, been expanding their territory at an alarming rate. In just 90 years of spaceflight, they have claimed over 40 star systems. They have established colonies in the neutral zones, areas that border Corellian space. They have built military vessels despite having no real enemies. They act as if they own the galaxy. Several representatives murmured in agreement. The Velkari delegation, a species that had been conquered by the Corellians centuries ago and now served as their vassals, nodded their insect-like heads. "But what concerns me most," Vexroth said, his 4 eyes narrowing as he stared directly at Linda Morrison, "is their arrogance. These creatures crawled out of their mudball barely 100 years ago. They have no history, no culture, no understanding of how the galaxy works. And yet they sit in this chamber as if they belong here, as if they are our equals." Linda started to rise, but Daniel placed a hand on her arm. "Not yet," his eyes said. "Let him finish." "I propose that the Council revoke humanity's provisional membership," Vexroth announced. "They have not earned a place among civilized species. Furthermore, I propose that the Council authorize a containment action. The humans must be taught their place. Their expansion into the neutral zones threatens Corellian interests, and we cannot allow this to continue." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some species seemed to agree with Vexroth. Others looked uncomfortable. A few, including the Andari and the Mekith, looked toward the human delegation with something like sympathy. "If the humans do not comply with immediate withdrawal from the neutral zones," Vexroth continued, raising his voice above the noise, "the Corellian Empire will be forced to take action. We will make an example of their colony world of New Haven, perhaps when 3 million of their kind are burning. The rest will understand that they are nothing more than insects beneath our feet." The chamber went completely silent. Even species that had supported Vexroth seemed shocked by his words. Threatening to destroy an entire colony to kill millions of civilians was extreme even by Corellian standards. Linda Morrison stood slowly. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "High Counselor Vexroth, I must object to this proposal and to your characterization of humanity. You may object all you wish, Vexorth replied, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Your objections mean nothing. You are weak. Your species is weak. You have no fleet capable of standing against us, no allies willing to defend you, no power of any kind. You exist because we have allowed you to exist. That privilege can be revoked. With respect, High Counselor, I would advise you to reconsider your words, Linda said. Humanity desires peace. We have always desired peace, but we will not be threatened. We will not allow our people to be harmed. Vexoroth laughed. It was an ugly sound, like rocks grinding together. Threatened. I am not threatening you, Ambassador. I am promising you. Within one rotation of your homeworld, New Haven will burn. Your people will learn their place in this galaxy, and you will watch it happen, knowing that you could do nothing to stop it. He turned to address the full council. I have made my position clear. The Corellian Empire will act with or without this council's approval. Any species that attempts to interfere will share humanity's fate. With that, he stepped off his platform and walked toward the exit, his delegation following behind him. The chamber remained silent until the doors closed behind them. Linda Morrison turned to Captain Hayes. Her face was pale, but her eyes were hard. Send a message to Fleet Command. Priority 1 encryption. Wake up, Admiral Carter. What should I tell them? Daniel asked. Tell them the Corellians just made the worst mistake in their empire's history, Linda replied. Tell them Operation Awakening is authorized. Daniel nodded and began typing on his communication device. Around them, representatives from other species watched with confusion and curiosity. They could not understand why the human ambassador did not look afraid. They could not understand the small, cold smile that had appeared on her face. They did not know what humanity was capable of. They did not know what secrets Earth had been keeping. They did not know that for 50 years, ever since first contact, humanity had been preparing for exactly this moment. But they would learn. The entire galaxy would learn. And the Corellian Empire would regret every word that Vexoroth had spoken, as Linda Morrison gathered her things and prepared to leave the chamber. She thought about New Haven. She thought about the 3 million people living there. Families who had traveled across the stars to build new lives. She thought about her son Jake, a fighter pilot stationed at the colony. She would protect them. Humanity would protect them. And the Corellians would discover that the species they had dismissed as insects had claws of their own. Admiral Patricia Carter had not slept in 36 hours. She stood on the bridge of the Earth carrier Relentless, watching holographic displays that showed the movement of Corellian ships toward
New Haven.
Red dots crawled across the map like drops of blood, each one representing a vessel capable of destroying cities. The numbers were not encouraging. 47 Corellian capital ships, each one larger than anything in the human fleet, 200 support vessels, destroyers and cruisers and troop transports, an invasion force designed to crush a planet and everyone on it. They're not even trying to hide, said Commander Samuel Grant, her executive officer. He was a younger man, barely 40, but he had proven himself in a dozen engagements against pirates and smugglers. This was different. This was war against an empire that had never been defeated. They want us to see them coming, Patricia replied. They want us to be afraid. They want us to surrender before the first shot is fired. Samuel looked at the display, at the overwhelming force heading toward 3 million human civilians. Should we be afraid? Patricia turned to face him. She was 62 years old, with white hair cut short and a face marked by decades of service. Her eyes were calm, almost peaceful. No, Commander. We should not be afraid. The Corellians have studied our public fleet numbers. They have studied our official military doctrine. They have studied everything we have allowed them to see. She paused, and a small smile crossed her face. They have not studied what we have hidden. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, Earth's moon, a facility that officially did not exist was coming to life. Dr. Henry Walsh walked through corridors carved from rock, passing laboratories where scientists worked on projects that had no names in any public document. He had spent 30 years here developing weapons and technologies that the galaxy did not know existed. Project Sentinel is ready, reported Dr. Maria Chen, his chief assistant. All 12 platforms have been activated and are awaiting deployment orders. What about the Wraith squadrons? Henry asked. Already in position. They reached the New Haven asteroid field 6 days ago. The Corellians have no idea they're there. Henry nodded. He had helped design the Wraith fighters himself, small craft with advanced stealth systems that made them invisible to every sensor the Corellians possessed. The pilots had trained for years in complete secrecy, preparing for a day that everyone hoped would never come. That day had arrived, on Earth. Secretary of Defense Howard Mitchell stood before the United Nations Emergency Council. The room was filled with the leaders of every nation, their faces grim as they watched footage from the Galactic Council chamber. Vexaroth's words echoed through speakers, his threats against New Haven making several representatives physically ill. The Corellians believe we are weak, Howard said, his voice steady. They believe that because we prefer diplomacy to warfare, we are incapable of warfare. They have looked at our public fleet, our official military spending, our declared weapon systems, and they have concluded that we pose no threat. He pressed a button, and the holographic display changed. Instead of the small fleet that the galaxy knew about, a much larger force appeared. Ships that had been built in hidden shipyards. Weapons that had been developed in secret laboratories. Soldiers who had trained in classified facilities scattered across human space. Actual military strength, Howard continued. For 50 years since first contact, we have been preparing for exactly this situation. We knew that eventually some species would see our youth as weakness. We knew that eventually someone would threaten our people. And we decided that when that day came, we would be ready. The representatives stared at the display in shock. The numbers were far beyond anything they had imagined. Earth had not been sleeping while the galaxy looked down on them. Earth had been preparing at the New Haven colony. Governor Timothy Blake addressed his people through every communication channel available. His face appeared on screens in homes, in public squares, in the shelters where families had gathered to wait for news. I know you are afraid, he said. I know the Corellian fleet is coming. I know what they have promised to do. But I am asking you to trust your fleet. Trust humanity. We have faced dark times before. We have faced enemies who thought we would break. And every single time, we have proven them wrong. He paused, looking directly into the camera. Stay in your homes. Keep your families close. And remember who we are. We are human beings. We do not surrender. We do not give up. And we will never, ever let anyone take our home without a fight. In the asteroid field beyond New Haven's outer moon, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison checked his fighter systems for the 100th time. Everything was green. Everything was ready. Around him, hidden among the rocks and debris, 300 other Wraith fighters waited in silence. Jake was Ambassador Linda Morrison's son. He had joined the military against her wishes, driven by a desire to protect the people and the species he loved. Now, as he watched the Corellian fleet approaching on his passive sensors, he was glad he had made that choice. His communication system crackled with a secure transmission from Admiral Carter. All units, this is Relentless Actual. The enemy fleet will reach engagement range in 4 hours. Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for. And remember that today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Jake smiled inside his helmet. The Corellians thought they were coming to crush helpless civilians. They thought this would be an easy victory, another conquest to add to their 4,000 years of domination. They were wrong. In hidden bases throughout the New Haven system, weapons powered up. Ships that the Corellians had never detected began moving into position. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment checked their equipment and said quiet prayers. The storm was gathering, and when it broke, the Corellian Empire would learn a lesson they would never forget. Admiral Carter watched the red dots continue their approach. Somewhere out there, High Admiral Korthvex was probably feeling confident. He was probably imagining the glory he would earn by destroying this human colony. He was probably already planning how he would describe the victory to his uncle. "Send a message to all commands," Patricia said quietly. "Authorization code Omega-7. Execute Operation Awakening." Samuel Grant entered the code and sent the signal. Across human space, from Earth to the frontier colonies, military units received the order. The mask was coming off. The galaxy was about to see humanity's true face, and the Corellians were about to understand the price of threatening human lives. High Admiral Korthvex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the blue and green world of New Haven grow larger in the viewport. It was a beautiful planet, he had to admit. Rolling oceans, vast forests, mountains that touched the clouds. It would be a shame to destroy it, but not much of a shame. His uncle Vexroth had given him clear orders. Make an example of the humans. Show the galaxy what happens when inferior species forget their place. Korthvex intended to follow those orders to the letter. He would burn every city on that planet. He would kill every man, woman, and child. And when he was finished, he would broadcast the images across the entire galaxy as a warning. "Human fleet detected," reported his sensor officer. 23 vessels. Admiral. They are forming a defensive line between us and the planet. Korthvex laughed. 23 ships against his armada of nearly 250. This was not a battle. This was an execution. "Open a channel to the human commander," he ordered. "I want to offer them a chance to surrender. It will make the victory even sweeter when they refuse." The communication screen flickered to life, showing a human female in a dark blue uniform. She had white hair and calm eyes that showed no fear. Korthvex found this irritating. She should be afraid. She should be begging for mercy. "Human commander, I am High Admiral Korthvex of the Corellian Empire. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender your ships, and I will make your deaths quick. Resist, and I will ensure that you live long enough to watch your planet burn." The human female smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something he did not. "Corellian fleet, this is Admiral Patricia Carter of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have violated human sovereign space. You have threatened human citizens. You have exactly one chance to withdraw. This is that chance." Korthvex stared at the screen in disbelief. Then he began to laugh. Around him, his bridge crew joined in, the harsh clicking sounds of Corellian amusement filling the air. "You are offering me a chance to withdraw? You, with your pathetic little fleet? You humans are even more delusional than I thought." He waved his hand dismissively. "All ships attack formation. Destroy them." The Corellian fleet moved forward in their traditional crescent formation. A shape designed to envelop enemy forces and attack from all sides. It had worked against the Valkyrie. It had worked against them, and it had worked against every species that had ever opposed them. It did not work against humanity. The first sign that something was wrong came from the asteroid field to the right of the Corellian formation. Sensors that had shown nothing but rocks and debris suddenly lit up with targets. Hundreds of targets. "Admiral, we are detecting weapons fire from the asteroid field," sensor officer reported, his voice rising with alarm. "Multiple platforms, energy signatures unknown. Our shields are taking damage." "Impossible," Korthvex snapped. There was nothing there. Our scouts surveyed that field. Sir, multiple ships emerging from behind the planet's moon. Human destroyers, at least 12. They are attacking our rear elements. Korthvex spun to face the tactical display. Red icons were appearing everywhere, human ships and weapons that had not been there moments before. The carefully planned envelopment was falling apart as Corellian vessels tried to respond to attacks from multiple directions, and then Admiral Carter's main fleet did. Something that no enemy had ever done in 4,000 years of Corellian military history. They charged directly into the center of the crescent, abandoning their defensive line and attacking at close range. "What are they doing?" Korthvex demanded. "They're breaking formation. They're throwing away every tactical advantage. Sir, at close range, our numerical superiority is meaningless. We cannot bring our full firepower to bear without hitting our own ships." The bridge shook as weapons struck the Eternal Dominion's shields. On the tactical display, Korthvex watched one of his cruisers explode, torn apart by concentrated fire from 3 human destroyers in his Wraith fighter. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison led his squadron through the chaos of battle. The small fighters were almost invisible to Corellian sensors, and they struck with devastating precision, targeting engine systems and weapon arrays on the larger enemy vessels. Phoenix Squadron, focus fire on that carrier's engines, Jake ordered. Hawk Squadron, cover our approach. Don't let those fighters get behind us. Copy that, Phoenix lead, Hawk Squadron engaging. Jake's targeting computer locked onto the massive Corellian carrier ahead of him. The ship was easily 100 times the size of his fighter, but size meant nothing when you knew exactly where to hit. He fired his missiles and watched them streak toward the carrier's engine housing. The explosions were beautiful. Secondary blasts tore through the carrier as fuel lines ruptured and power systems overloaded. The great ship began to drift, helpless, its weapons falling silent. On the Eternal Dominion, alarms screamed and officers shouted reports that grew worse with every passing minute. 30 ships lost, 50 ships lost. The human fleet seemed to be everywhere at once, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the debris and confusion. Sir, we have lost 60% of our capital ships, the executive officer reported, his voice trembling. We must withdraw. We do not withdraw, Korthvex snarled. We are Corellians. We have never retreated from any enemy. If we stay, we will be destroyed. There will be no one left to bring word of this defeat to the homeworld. Korthvex looked at the tactical display. His beautiful fleet, the pride of the Corellian navy, was being torn apart by creatures his uncle had called insects. His cruisers were burning. His carriers were crippled. His destroyers were scattered and fighting for survival. All ships, fall back to Rally Point Beta, he ordered, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. We are withdrawing. Surviving Corellian vessels began to retreat, pursued by human fighters that seemed to appear out of nowhere. As the Eternal Dominion limped toward the edge of the system, a final transmission came through from Admiral Carter. New Haven stands. Hi, Admiral. Return to your homeworld. Tell your council that humanity sends its regards. Tell your uncle that if he threatens our people again, we will come to Corellia Prime and deliver our response in person. Korthvex did not reply. He simply stood on his damaged bridge, watching the blue and green world of New Haven grow smaller in the viewport, and wondered how everything had gone so terribly wrong. On the planet below, Governor Timothy Blake received word of the victory. He stepped outside his shelter, looked up at the sky where distant lights still flickered from the battle, and allowed himself to weep with relief. 3 million people had been saved. The Corellian Empire had been humiliated, and humanity had announced to the galaxy that it was no longer willing to be pushed around. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the Relentless, watching the last Corellian ships flee into the darkness of space. She was tired, more tired than she had ever been in her life.
Oh.
But she was also proud. Send a message to Earth Command, she said quietly. The battle is over. New Haven is secure. Humanity stands. The news of the defeat reached Corellia Prime before High Counselor Vexroth could prepare any kind of response. Communication ships carrying desperate messages from the survivors of the First Fleet arrived at the homeworld within hours of the battle, and within days every citizen of the Empire knew what had happened. The reaction was unlike anything the Corellian Empire had experienced in 4,000 years. Shock turned to disbelief. Disbelief turned to anger. And anger turned to fear in the great palace at the heart of the capital city. Emperor Kethvalos summoned Vexreth to explain himself. The throne room was vast and cold, decorated with trophies from 100 conquered worlds. The skulls of defeated enemies lined the walls, silent reminders of Corellian power. Now those reminders seemed almost mocking. 60% of the First Fleet, the Emperor said, his voice quiet but filled with barely controlled rage. 147 ships destroyed, 43,000 soldiers dead, and all against a species you described as insects. Vexaroth stood before the throne, his 4 eyes fixed on the floor. He had never felt true fear before. He felt it now. Your Majesty, the intelligence was faulty. The humans had hidden capabilities that we did not anticipate. Hidden capabilities that you did not anticipate because you did not look. Because you were so certain of your superiority that you did not bother to consider that you might be wrong. The Emperor leaned forward. Promise me an easy victory. You promised me that humanity would be crushed within days. Instead, you have given me the worst military defeat in our Empire's history. Before Vexaroth could respond, an aide rushed into the throne room, his face pale with terror. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. There is an emergency. Our financial systems are failing. What do you mean failing? The Emperor demanded. I do not know how to explain it, Your Majesty. Our credit networks are collapsing. Ships cannot access fuel reserves. Soldiers cannot receive their pay. Trade agreements are being canceled across the galaxy. Our entire economy is in chaos, thousands of light years away. Commander Elena Martinez sat in a small room on a space station that officially belonged to a neutral species. Around her, a team of human intelligence operatives worked at computer terminals, their fingers flying across keyboards as they manipulated data streams that connected the Corellian Empire to the rest of galactic civilization. Their central banking system is down, reported one of her team members. They're trying to restore it, but every time they get close, we hit them with another virus. Good, Elena replied. What about their military supply chains? Already disrupted. Fuel shipments are being rerouted to nowhere. Ammunition factories are receiving incorrect orders. Their fleet can't resupply, and they won't be able to fix it for weeks. Elena allowed herself a small smile. The Corellians had spent 4,000 years building an empire through military force. They had never considered that there were other ways to fight a war. They had never imagined that a species they considered primitive could reach into their most secure systems and tear them apart from the inside. Humanity had been preparing for this conflict for 50 years. They had placed operatives throughout galactic civilization, building networks, and gathering intelligence. They had studied every potential enemy, including the Corellians, and they had developed plans to defeat them without ever firing a shot. The military victory at New Haven had been impressive. What was happening now was devastating. At the Galactic Council, Ambassador Linda Morrison stood before the assembled. Representatives with evidence that human intelligence had gathered over decades. Images and documents appeared on the great display screen, revealing secrets that the Corellian Empire had believed were safely hidden. These are records of Corellian war crimes against the Velkhari species, Linda announced, as images of devastated cities and mass graves filled the screen. For centuries, the Corellians have claimed that the Velkhari joined their empire willingly. These records prove that is a lie. The Velkhari were conquered through genocide and enslaved through terror. Murmurs of shock and outrage rippled through the chamber. The Velkhari delegation. Those insect-like beings who had nodded along with Vexaroth's speech just weeks ago sat in stunned silence as evidence of their ancestors' suffering was displayed for all to see. These are records of illegal weapons development, Linda continued. The Corellian Empire has been building planet-killing devices in violation of every treaty they have signed. They have tested these weapons on inhabited worlds in the outer reaches of their territory. Worlds whose destruction they blamed on natural disasters. More images, more evidence, more gasps of horror from the assembled representatives. And these are records of bribes paid to members of this very council, Linda said, her voice cold. High Counselor Vexaroth has been buying votes and silencing opposition for over a century. He has corrupted the institution that is supposed to maintain peace and justice in our galaxy. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted accusations and denials. Several species began arguing with each other as old alliances fractured and new suspicions emerged. Linda waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. Counselor Vexaroth called humanity vermin. He threatened to burn our colony. He promised to teach us our place in the galaxy. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the chamber. We have learned our place. It is here among the stars, as equals. And we have taught the Corellian Empire a lesson they will not forget. On Corellia Prime, civil unrest had begun. Citizens who had been told their entire lives that their empire was invincible were now watching it crumble. The military's failure had exposed weaknesses that had been hidden for centuries. The economy's collapse had made daily life impossible. And worst of all, the subject species were stirring. The Velkari, the Mendorians, the Trathkal, all the peoples who had been conquered and forced to serve the Empire were beginning to rise up. They saw what the humans had done. They saw that the Corellians could be beaten. They wanted their freedom. Emperor Kethvalos watched reports of riots and rebellions from his throne room, and he knew that he was running out of options. The First Fleet was shattered. The economy was in ruins. The subjects were turning against him. Somewhere out there, the humans were watching, waiting to see what he would do next. He could continue the war, could throw everything he had at humanity and hope for victory. But if he did that, and if he lost again, there would be no Corellian Empire left to save. Or he could do something that no Corellian Emperor had done in 4,000 years. He could ask for peace. Contact the human government directly, he ordered his aide. Do not go through the council. Tell them I wish to discuss terms, Your Majesty. That would be unprecedented. It would be seen as an admission of weakness. We are weak, the Emperor replied, and the words seemed to age him 1,000 years. We have been weak for a very long time. We simply did not know it. Now we do. Contact the humans. Perhaps there is still time to save something from this disaster. On Earth, President Catherine Shaw received the message in her off. Ice. She read it twice, then looked at Secretary Mitchell and Admiral Carter, who had returned from New Haven as a hero. They want peace, she said quietly. They want survival, Admiral Carter corrected. There is a difference. President Shaw nodded slowly. Then let us discuss what survival will cost them, and let us ensure that no species ever threatens humanity again. The Treaty of Geneva was signed on a cool autumn day in the old Swiss city. In the same building where humans had once gathered to write rules for warfare among themselves, it seemed appropriate to President Catherine Shaw that this moment, this reshaping of humanity's place in the galaxy, should happen in a place that had witnessed so much human history, the Corellian. Delegation arrived through a specially constructed transport gate. The first time such alien technology had been used on Earth, they walked through the streets of Geneva under heavy guard. It's not because humanity feared an attack, but because crowds had gathered from around the world to see the once mighty empire. Brought load Emperor Kethvalos did not come himself. That would have been too great a humiliation. Instead, he sent a representative named Selvrith, a younger official who had privately opposed the war from the beginning. Selvrith was the nephew of Vexerith, the one who had started all of this, but he was a different kind of Corellian. He understood that his species had made a terrible mistake, and he was determined to find a way forward. Ambassador Linda Morrison greeted him at the entrance to the conference hall. She had spent weeks negotiating the terms of this treaty, fighting for every provision, ensuring that humanity would never again be vulnerable to this kind of threat. Ambassador Selvrith said, bowing his head in the human gesture of respect that he had studied before coming to Earth, I want to thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Many in my government believed that humanity would demand nothing less than our complete destruction. Destruction serves no one, Linda replied. The goal has always been peace, true peace, built on mutual respect and fair treatment. Your uncle did not understand that. I hope you do. The conference hall was filled with representatives from Earth's nations, as well as observers from other species who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness this moment. The Velkari were there, their insect-like faces unreadable, but their presence a reminder of what the Corellians had done to conquered peoples. The Andari were there, and the Mekith, and dozens of others who had watched the conflict unfold and were now waiting to see how it would end. President Shaw stood at the head of the table. The treaty document displayed on screens throughout the room. This document represents not just the end of a conflict, but the beginning of a new era. The Corellian Empire has agreed to the following terms. She began to read, and with each provision, the magnitude of what humanity had achieved became clearer. 3 star systems, including resource-rich territories that the Corellians had held for centuries, would be transferred to human control. Reparations would be paid to New Haven and to the families of those who had died defending it. High Counselor Vexroth would be removed from his position and exiled. to a prison world for the rest of his natural life. But the terms went further than punishment. Much further, the Corellians were required to free every species they had conquered. The Velkari, the Mindorians, the Trathkal. All of them would be given independence and the right to determine their own futures. The Corellian military was restricted to defensive operations for 50 years. With human observers stationed throughout their space to ensure compliance, their borders would be open to independent inspectors, who would monitor for any attempt to rebuild their offensive capabilities. These terms are harsh, President Shah acknowledged, looking at the Corellian delegation, but they are fair. Your empire chose to threaten innocent civilians. Your leaders chose to start a war they could not win. Actions have consequences, and these are the consequences of your actions. Selvaroth stood to respond. His voice was steady, though Linda could see the pain in his 4 eyes. We accept these terms. We accept them not because we have no choice, although that is true. We accept them because they are just. My uncle believed that strength came from domination. He was wrong. True strength comes from treating others with honor and respect. Humanity has taught us that lesson, and we will not forget it. The signing ceremony took less than an hour. Pens moved across paper, seals were applied, and 4,000 years of Corellian expansion came to an end. As the delegates filed out of the conference hall, Selvaroth approached Ambassador Morrison one last time. Ambassador, I must ask you something. Your species knew this could happen. You had prepared for years. Your hidden fleet, your intelligence networks, your economic weapons. Why did you not simply reveal your strength? Why allow my uncle to believe you were weak? Linda considered the question for a long moment before answering. Because we hoped it would never be necessary. Humanity does not seek war, counselor. We spent 50 years building those defenses while praying we would never use them. Every ship we constructed in secret, every operative we placed in your systems, every weapon we developed in hidden laboratories, all of it was built in the hope that it would never be needed. And now we move forward. Your empire will recover in time. Our species will continue to grow. And perhaps in a century or two, we will be allies rather than enemies. Humanity's memory is long, but it is not eternal. We can forgive if your people prove worthy of forgiveness. Across human space, the celebrations had ended, but the work continued. In military academies, Battle of New Haven was already being studied by young officers who would one day lead fleets of their own. In diplomatic schools, Ambassador Morrison's handling of the crisis became required reading. In shipyards, new vessels were being constructed. No longer hidden, but proudly displayed for all to see. Admiral Carter returned to active duty after a brief rest. Promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of Earth's combined naval forces. She stood on the observation deck of a new space station orbiting Earth. Watching shuttles carry supplies and personnel, 2 vessels that would soon spread out across human territory, her daughter Sophie. A newly commissioned ensign stood beside her. The young woman had graduated at the top of her class, driven by the same desire to protect humanity that had motivated her mother. Do you think there will be more conflicts like this? Sophie asked, her eyes fixed on the stars. Patricia considered the question carefully. Probably. The galaxy is vast, and not every species has learned the lesson that the Corellians learned. There are empires out there that still believe might makes right, that still think they can take what they want through force. What do we do about that? We prepare. We train. We build. Not because we want to fight, but because we want to protect what matters. Humanity's strength lies not in our weapons or our ships, but in our willingness to defend our people no matter the cost. Sophie nodded slowly. And if someone threatens us again? Patricia smiled, the same cold smile that Ambassador Morrison had worn in the Galactic Council chamber. The same smile that had spread across every human face when the news of New Haven's victory had reached Earth. Then we remind them of what happened here. We remind them that humanity may be young, but we are not weak. And we never, ever forget when someone threatens our home. At the Galactic Council, humanity's delegation now occupied a much larger section of the chamber. Their voices carried weight that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Other species watched them with new eyes, a mixture of respect and caution. Ambassador Morrison addressed the council. One final time before returning to Earth, she stood at the center of the chamber, her image projected on screens that could be seen by every representative, and she spoke with a voice that carried across the stars. We did not ask for this conflict. We did not seek to humble the Corellian Empire. But when our people were threatened, when our home was in danger, we responded with everything we had. That is what humanity does. That is who we are. She paused, her gaze moving across the assembled representatives. We hope this council remembers that. We hope that from this day forward, all species will treat each other with respect and fairness. We hope that no one else will make the mistake that Vexroth made. Her voice hardened. But if any species threatens human worlds again, there will be no warnings. There will be no second chances. We have shown you what we can do when provoked. Pray you never see what we can do when truly angry. The council chamber fell silent as she walked out, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Behind her, representatives from 200 species sat in stunned silence, contemplating a future in which humanity was no longer a minor player to be dismissed and ignored, but a major power to be respected and feared outside the chamber. Linda Morrison stopped to look out a viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, her son Jake was flying patrol around New Haven. Somewhere out there, millions of human settlers were building new lives on worlds that their grandparents could never have imagined. Somewhere out there, the future of humanity stretched out like an endless road. Bright with possibility, they had faced their greatest test and emerged stronger than ever. They had shown the galaxy that the species from the small blue planet was not to be underestimated, and they had proved once